She whispered, "You're more than family to me." My blood ran cold. I was sitting on her couch, the same one I'd crashed on as a kid during family barbecues, the same one where we'd laughed over old photo albums just hours before. The cushions smelled faintly of lavender, her favorite scent, and the room was dim, lit only by a flickering lamp in the corner. But now, the air felt thick, wrong, like the walls were closing in on me. My aunt, my mom's older sister, Clara, the woman who'd practically raised me during the worst years of my life, was looking at me with eyes that didn't belong in a family story. They were soft, searching, and way too intense, like she was seeing something in me I didn't even know existed. I wanted to unhear it, to rewind the moment, to go back to 10 minutes ago when we were just joking about my terrible teenage haircut. But her words hung there, heavy, like a confession you can't take back. How do you even process something like that? How do you look at someone you've called family your whole life and realize they've been seeing you as something else? I'm not gonna lie, my first instinct was to bolt. Just grab my keys, walk out the front door, and pretend it never happened. My hands were shaking, my keys right there on the coffee table, glinting under the lamplight. But I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the hardwood floor, my mind racing with questions I didn't want answers to. When did this start? Was it always there, lurking in the background of every hug, every smile? Had I missed something all these years? And the worst part of me felt guilty, like I'd somehow caused this. Like I'd invited it without knowing. That's what messes you up the most, the shame that creeps in, even when you've done nothing wrong. It's like a poison, seeping into your thoughts, making you question everything. I was 24, stuck in her house during the worst family crisis we'd ever faced, and now this. Let me take you back to how I ended up here, because trust me, it wasn't supposed to go like this. My name's Ethan, and I guess you could say I've always been the guy who holds things together. Growing up, my family was a mess: divorce, money problems, the kind of chaos that leaves you feeling like you're always one step away from falling apart. My mom worked double shifts at a diner, coming home with grease stains on her uniform and exhaustion in her eyes. My dad. He bailed when I was 9, leaving behind a trail of empty promises and unpaid bills. So, a lot of the time, it was just me and my older brother, Jake, trying to figure things out. But Jake was always off doing his own thing, chasing girls, or getting into fights, so I ended up spending most of my childhood at my Aunt Clara's place. She was my mom's older sister by 5 years, the one who had it all together, or at least that's how it seemed to me back then. Clara was the cool aunt, you know. The one who'd let you stay up late watching horror movies, sneaking popcorn under the blankets while the TV glowed with scenes of zombies or haunted houses. Her fridge was always stocked with soda, the good kind, not the off-brand stuff Mom bought. She'd tell stories about her wild college days, parties, road trips, the time she almost got arrested for sneaking into a concert. She was in her late 30s when I was a kid, single, no kids of her own, always joking about how I was the closest thing she'd ever have to a son. I ate it up. To me, Clara was a superhero. She taught me how to drive in her beat-up old sedan, laughing when I stalled it in her driveway. She showed up to my high school soccer games, cheering louder than anyone when I scored, even though I was never that good. When Mom and I fought, and we fought a lot, Clara was the one I'd call. She'd listen, not judge, and somehow make it all feel less heavy. She was family, solid, dependable, the kind of person you lean on when everything else falls apart. Fast forward to last year. I was 24, working a dead-end job at a warehouse, forklifting boxes of car parts for minimum wage, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. I wasn't exactly living the dream, but I was getting by, saving up for a place of my own someday. Then my mom got sick. Not just sick, hospitalized, weeks in the ICU, the kind of thing that stops your world cold. It was some kind of autoimmune thing, the doctor said, but they kept throwing around words like complications and long-term care that made my chest tight. My dad was long gone, no help there. Jake, my brother, was halfway across the country, working some tech job in Seattle, too busy to come back for more than a quick visit. So, it was just me and Clara handling things. She stepped up in a way I didn't expect, even for her. She was at the hospital every day, talking to doctors, sorting out insurance, paying bills when my paycheck couldn't cover it. She kept Mom's spirits up, bringing her favorite magazines and sneaking in homemade cookies. I don't know how we would have gotten through it without her. The hospital bills were brutal, though. My savings were gone in a month, and Mom's insurance only covered so much. Clara saw me stressing, saw the way I was barely eating to save cash, and she offered to let me stay at her place. It was a no-brainer. Her house was only a 20-minute drive from the hospital, and I was already spending half my time there anyway, crashing on her couch after late-night visits to Mom. Plus, her place felt familiar, safe, like stepping back into the one part of my childhood that hadn't been tainted by chaos. I packed a duffel bag and moved in, thinking it'd be temporary, just until Mom got better. Clara's house was this cozy, old two-story with creaky hardwood floors and way too many plants. She was obsessed with gardening, always had been. Her living room looked like a jungle, with ferns spilling over shelves and vines curling around the windows. It smelled like earth and lavender, and there was always a kettle on the stove, ready for tea. We'd spend evenings there, sitting on that same old couch, talking about Mom, reminiscing about better days, like the time we all went camping and Clara accidentally set her tent on fire trying to light a lantern. It was nice, you know. Comforting. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe, like I wasn't carrying the whole world on my shoulders. Clara was there, making it easier, making me feel like I wasn't alone. But looking back, there were little things I didn't notice at first. Things that seemed innocent but, in hindsight, should have set off alarms. Like how she'd sit a little too close on the couch, her knee brushing against mine as we watched TV. Or how her compliments started feeling different. "You've grown into such a strong man, Ethan," she'd say, her voice soft, her eyes lingering a second too long. I'd smile, mumble a thanks, and change the subject. She was just being nice, right? Clara was family. You don't question family. You don't think twice about the way they look at you or the way their hand rests on your arm. You just don't. But then things started to shift. It was subtle at first, like a crack in a window you don't notice until it spiders out. She'd touch my arm when we talked, her fingers staying there just a beat too long, warm against my skin. She'd laugh at my dumb jokes, stupid stuff, like me imitating the warehouse manager's bad to pay, like they were the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Her eyes would light up, and she'd tilt her head, watching me like I was the only person in the world. It made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on why. One night, she poured us both wine, nothing weird, we'd done it before, just chilling after a long day. But she kept refilling my glass, her movements slow, deliberate, her eyes locked on me with this intensity that made my skin itch. I told myself I was imagining it. I mean, this was Clara. The woman who'd bandaged my skinned knees when I was 10, who'd driven me to my first school dance when Mom was too tired. But deep down, something felt off, like a warning bell I couldn't quite hear, ringing somewhere in the back of my mind. It was about 3 months into staying at her place when it happened. Mom was still in the hospital, stable but not out of the woods. The doctors were optimistic, but every day was a roller coaster, good news followed by setbacks, hope followed by fear. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, just trying to keep my head above water. Clara had been a rock through it all, always there with a plan, a kind word, a cup of coffee when I needed it most. But that night, something felt different. We were in her living room, just the two of us, the TV humming in the background with some reality show neither of us was really watching. I was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through my phone, half listening to her talk about some old family vacation from when I was a kid, something about a lake and a canoe that tipped over. Her voice was warm, nostalgic, and I was only half paying attention, nodding along as I checked work emails. Then she went quiet. The silence was sudden, heavy, like the air had shifted. I looked up from my phone, and she was staring at me, her face soft but intense. Her eyes were locked on mine, and there was this look in them, like she was trying to decide something big. My stomach twisted. I don't know why, but I knew whatever she was about to say was going to change things. "Ethan," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, "can I tell you something?" My heart started pounding, and I felt this urge to stop her, to say no, to get up and leave before she could speak. But I just nodded, my throat too tight to form words. She leaned closer, her hands folded tightly in her lap, like she was bracing herself. "You're more than family to me," she said. "You always have been." My heart stopped. I mean, literally, it felt like the world froze, like time itself hit pause. I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to laugh and say she was kidding, that it was some weird joke. But she didn't. Her face was dead serious, her eyes wide, almost pleading, glistening with something I didn't want to name. "I know it's wrong," she went on, her voice shaking now, cracking at the edges. "I've tried to ignore it, but I can't. I've loved you for years, Ethan. Not like an aunt. Like, more." I felt sick. My stomach churned, and my mouth went dry, like I'd swallowed sand. My mind was screaming, trying to process what she'd just said. Loved me? For years. This wasn't some random moment, some fleeting lapse in judgment. She was saying this had been building, that she'd been feeling this way while I was clueless, while I was calling her family, while I was sleeping under her roof. My thoughts spiraled, crashing into each other. How long? Since when? Since I was a teenager. A kid? The idea made my skin crawl, made me want to scrub every memory of her out of my head. "Clara, what are you talking about?" I finally managed, but it came out harsher than I meant, my voice sharp with panic. She flinched, like I'd slapped her, but she didn't back down. "I know it's a lot," she said, her voice breaking, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I see the way you look at me sometimes. The way you smile. I thought, maybe you felt something too." My stomach lurched again, harder this time. Had I done something to make her think that? Had I accidentally led her on? I replayed every moment in my head, every laugh we'd shared, every hug, every late-night talk about Mom or life or nothing at all. Was there something I'd missed? Something I'd done wrong? Had I smiled too much, been too friendly, too open? The guilt hit me like a wave, mixing with the revulsion, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream that she was wrong, that I'd never looked at her that way, that she was my aunt, for God's sake. But my voice was stuck, trapped somewhere between shock and disgust. I pushed myself off the couch, my legs shaky, needing space, needing air. The room felt too small, the jungle of plants suddenly suffocating. "Clara, you're my aunt," I said, my voice trembling, barely holding together. This can't happen." Her face crumpled, and for a split second, I felt guilty, like I was the one hurting her, like I was the one breaking something. But then the reality slammed back into me: this was my aunt. My mom's sister. The woman who'd been like a second mother to me, who'd patched me up after bike crashes and cheered me on at games. And she was sitting there, confessing feelings that made my skin crawl, that turned my entire world upside down. I don't even remember what I said next. My brain was a fog, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. I think I mumbled something about needing to check on Mom, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. I grabbed my keys, the metal cold against my sweaty palm, and headed for the door. She didn't try to stop me, just sat there on the couch, staring at the floor, tears streaming down her face. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I got in my car, my hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the key in the ignition. I drove to the hospital, not because I needed to be there, but because it was the only place I could think to go. The whole way, my mind was a mess, her words echoing over and over: "You're more than family to me." How do you even begin to deal with something like that? Do you tell someone? Do you pretend it never happened? And the worst part, the part that made my chest ache, was that I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow to blame. Like I'd let this happen by being too close, too trusting, too naive. The next few days were a blur, like I was moving through quicksand. I couldn't go back to Clara's house, not after that. I crashed at a friend's place, sleeping on his lumpy couch, staring at the ceiling until dawn. But I couldn't avoid her forever. Mom was still in the hospital, and Clara was still the one handling most of the logistics, scheduling appointments, dealing with insurance, keeping the family updated. She was still showing up, still acting like the perfect aunt, like nothing had happened. I had to see her, had to stand in the same room as her, had to act normal, like my whole world hadn't just been flipped upside down. But every time I looked at her, I saw that moment in the living room, her eyes burning into mine, her words cutting through me like glass. And the guilt, it was eating me alive. Not just guilt over what she'd said, but guilt over how I was handling it. Was I being too harsh? Was I abandoning her when she needed me? She was family, after all. But what does family even mean when someone crosses a line like that? What do you do when the person you trusted most turns out to be someone you don't even recognize? I tried to keep things civil, but it was like walking on eggshells, every step careful, calculated. Every conversation felt loaded, every glance heavy with meaning I didn't want to see. Clara didn't bring it up again, didn't mention that night, but she didn't need to. It was there in the way she moved, the way she'd hesitate before saying my name, like she was testing the waters. I started noticing things I'd ignored before, things that made my stomach twist. The way she'd light up when I walked into a room, her whole face softening, her eyes following me a little too closely. The way she'd find excuses to touch me, a hand on my shoulder when she passed me a cup of coffee, a brush of her fingers against my arm when we talked. It wasn't innocent anymore. It was deliberate, and it made my skin crawl, made me want to scrub every moment of contact off my body. But here's the thing that messed me up the most, part of me still cared about her. Not like that, God, no, but as family. Clara had been there for me my whole life, through every fight with my parents, every rough patch, every time I felt like the world was caving in. She'd been my safe place, the one person I could always count on. When I failed my first driving test, she was the one who took me out for ice cream and told me it didn't matter, that I'd get it next time. When Mom and I screamed at each other over my grades, Clara was the one who let me crash at her place, who listened without judging. She'd been my rock, my anchor. And now that was gone, replaced by this thing I couldn't even name. It was like losing a part of myself, like the foundation I'd built my life on had cracked and was crumbling beneath me. I kept asking myself, when did it start? Had she always felt this way, even when I was a kid? The thought made me sick, sent my mind spiraling to places I didn't want to go. I started replaying memories, looking for signs, dissecting every moment we'd spent together. Was that hug too tight when I was 16, when I'd just gotten my license and she'd squeezed me so hard I laughed? Was that compliment about my eyes when I was 18, when she'd said they were, just like your mom's but brighter, something more? It was like my entire past with her was tainted now, rewritten by her confession. Every happy memory felt suspect, like there was a shadow lurking behind it. I couldn't trust my own history anymore, and that was the worst part. It wasn't just the present she'd broken, it was the past, too. I couldn't tell anyone. Not my mom, she was too sick, still hooked up to machines, still fighting to get better. Telling her would have been like dropping a bomb on her recovery, and I couldn't do that to her. Not my brother, either. Jake had never been close to Clara, always thought she was too involved in our lives. If I told him, he'd probably just tell me to cut her off, to walk away and never look back. But cutting her off wasn't that simple. She was still helping with Mom's care, still showing up at the hospital with coffee and updates, still playing the role of the perfect aunt. She was woven into our lives, into our family, and untangling her would mean ripping everything apart. Plus, how do you even explain something like this? Hey, Jake, Aunt Clara said she's in love with me. Just saying it out loud felt wrong, like I was betraying her somehow, even though she was the one who'd crossed the line. And that was the worst part, the guilt. It wasn't just about what she'd said, but about how I was handling it. Every time I ignored her calls, every time I dodged her at the hospital, I felt like I was abandoning her, like I was the one breaking our family. She'd been there for me my whole life, and now I was treating her like a stranger. But what else could I do? Every time I saw her, I felt that same mix of revulsion and pity, like I was torn between hating her and wanting to fix her. It was exhausting, this constant tug-of-war in my head. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of my friend's apartment, wondering if I was overreacting, if I was making it bigger than it was. Maybe she didn't mean it the way I thought. Maybe it was just a moment of weakness, a mistake born out of stress and loneliness. But then I'd remember her eyes, the way they'd burned into me, and I'd know it wasn't a mistake. It was real, and it was wrong. About a week after that night, I had to go back to her house. There was some paperwork for the hospital, insurance forms Mom needed, that I'd left in the guest room. It was late, past 10 p.m., and I was hoping she'd be asleep, that I could slip in and out without seeing her. No such luck. I pulled into her driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires, and saw the kitchen light on. My heart sank, but I didn't have a choice. I needed those papers. I let myself in with the spare key, moving as quietly as I could, but the creaky floors betrayed me. Before I could make it to the stairs, she called out, "Ethan. Is that you?" She was in the kitchen, standing by the counter, wearing this thin robe that made me instantly uncomfortable. It was pale blue, almost sheer, and it clung to her in a way that felt wrong. I froze in the doorway, my hand still on the knob, like I could still turn back and pretend I'd never come. "Hey," I said, my voice flat. "Just grabbing some stuff." I wanted to keep it short, to get out as fast as possible, but she stepped closer, her hands clasped tight like she was trying to hold herself together. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft, "can we talk?" My heart sank deeper, a cold weight in my chest. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to be in the same room as her. But I nodded, because what else could I do? I followed her to the kitchen table, sitting across from her, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast together 100 times, where she'd helped me with math homework when I was 12. Now it felt like a battlefield. She sat down, her hands still clasped, her eyes red like she'd been crying. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't have said what I did. It was wrong. I've been so lonely, and you've been so good to me. I got confused." Her words sounded sincere, and part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to think it was just a mistake, a one-time thing we could bury and move past. But then she reached for my hand, her fingers brushing mine, and I pulled back so fast I almost knocked over the chair. The scrape of wood against the floor was loud in the quiet room, and she froze, her hand hovering in the air. "Clara, stop," I said, my voice sharp, louder than I meant. "This isn't okay. It's never going to be okay." Her face changed then, not sad anymore, but angry, though I don't think it was at me. It was like she was angry at herself, at the situation, at the world. "You don't get it," she said, her voice low, almost a growl. "You don't know what it's like to feel something you can't control, to know it's wrong but not be able to stop." She looked at me, her eyes pleading again, like she was begging me to understand. "I've tried, Ethan. I've tried so hard to push it down, to be normal. But you're the only one who's ever really seen me, who's made me feel alive." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her she had no right to say that, to put this on me, to make me feel like I was responsible for her feelings. But I just sat there, frozen, my hands clenched into fists under the table. She kept talking, her voice raw, spilling out years of loneliness, of failed relationships, of pouring everything into our family, into me. She said I was the one good thing in her life, the one person who'd never let her down. It was like she was trying to justify it, to make me see it from her side, but all I could think was, this is my aunt. This is my family. And it's falling apart. I don't know how long we sat there, her talking, me barely listening, my mind screaming at me to leave. Finally, I stood up, my chair scraping again, and said, "I can't do this, Clara. I just can't." I grabbed the paperwork from the guest room and left, the door slamming behind me. I didn't look back, didn't want to see her face, didn't want to feel that guilt again. I drove to a cheap motel near the hospital and checked in, the kind of place with stained carpets and a flickering neon sign. I stayed there for the next few weeks, avoiding her house, avoiding her as much as I could. But the guilt followed me. It was like a shadow, always there, creeping into every quiet moment. I kept thinking about what she'd said, about being lonely, about feeling something she couldn't control. I hated her for saying it, for making me carry it, but I also felt sorry for her. She was family, and family's supposed to stick together, right? But how do you stick together when someone crosses a line like that? How do you forgive something that changes everything you thought you knew about them? I'd lie awake in that motel room, the hum of the air conditioner drowning out the world, and wonder if I was the one doing something wrong. Maybe I was too cold, too quick to judge. Maybe I should have stayed, talked it out, tried to understand. But then I'd remember her hand reaching for mine, her voice saying things no aunt should ever say, and the revulsion would hit me all over again, like a punch to the gut. The weeks that followed were torture. Mom was starting to get better, slowly, but I was falling apart. I couldn't focus at work, kept messing up orders, snapping at coworkers for no reason. I couldn't sleep, my dreams haunted by that night, by her eyes, her voice. Every time my phone buzzed, I was terrified it'd be Clara, trying to talk again, trying to pull me back into that mess. And when I did see her, at the hospital, always with other people around, she acted like nothing had happened. She'd smile, make small talk about Mom's progress, ask if I needed anything. It was like she'd flipped a switch, like she could pretend it away. But I couldn't. Every time I saw her, I felt that moment in the living room all over again, her words cutting through me like a knife, sharp and relentless. I started questioning everything. Was I overreacting? Was I making it bigger than it was? Maybe she'd just been emotional, caught up in the stress of Mom's illness, the long nights, the shared grief. Maybe I'd misread her, twisted her words into something they weren't. But then I'd remember the way she'd looked at me, the way her voice had trembled, and I'd know I wasn't wrong. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was real, and it was eating me alive. I was stuck in this loop, guilt, anger, shame, repeat. I'd walk through the hospital corridors, past the beeping machines and tired nurses, and feel like I was carrying a secret I didn't ask for, a weight I didn't know how to put down. I tried to focus on Mom, on the small victories, her first day without a fever, the first time she smiled in weeks. But even that felt tainted. Clara was still there, still part of the team keeping Mom afloat. She'd bring Mom's favorite soup, sit by her bedside, tell stories that made Mom laugh. And I'd watch her, trying to reconcile the woman I'd known my whole life with the one who'd confessed something unthinkable. How could she be both? How could she be the aunt who'd saved us, who'd stepped up when no one else did, and also the person who'd shattered my sense of family? I didn't know how to hold those two truths at the same time. It's been 6 months since that night, and things are different. Mom's out of the hospital now, back home, doing better every day. She's still weak, still needs help, but she's fighting, and that's enough for now. Clara's still around, but not as much. I've put distance between us, polite, careful distance. I don't go to her house anymore, don't answer her calls unless they're about Mom. She hasn't brought it up again, hasn't pushed, hasn't tried to bridge the gap. Sometimes I catch her looking at me, at family dinners or hospital visits, and there's this sadness in her eyes, like she knows she broke something that can't be fixed. And maybe she's right. I don't know if I'll ever see her the same way again, if I'll ever be able to sit across from her and not feel that knot in my stomach. Here's the twist, though, the thing that turned everything upside down one more time. A few weeks ago, I was at Mom's place, going through a box of her old papers, trying to sort out some insurance stuff that was still a mess. Tucked in with the bills and letters was a small notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges. It was Clara's, from years ago, back when I was a teenager. I shouldn't have read it, I knew it was private, but my hands moved before my brain could stop them. I flipped it open, and there were entries about me. Nothing explicit, nothing that screamed what I'd heard that night, but little things: how proud she was when I graduated, how much she loved watching me grow up, how I was the best part of her day. It was sweet at first, the kind of stuff you'd expect from an aunt. But then I found one entry, dated 5 years ago, when I was 19. It was short, just a few lines, but it hit me like a punch: Ethan's becoming a man, and it's beautiful to see. Sometimes I wonder if I love him too much. God help me, I don't know what to do with it. 5 years. She'd been carrying this for half a decade, maybe longer, and I never had a clue. I sat there on Mom's living room floor, the notebook in my hands, feeling like the ground had dropped out from under me again. It wasn't just that night in her living room, it wasn't a moment of weakness or confusion. It was years of something she'd buried, something she'd fought, something she'd let slip out when she couldn't hold it in anymore. That journal changed everything. It didn't make me forgive her, God, no, I don't think I can, but it made me see her differently. Not just as my aunt, not just as the woman who'd crossed a line, but as someone broken, someone who'd been fighting a battle I couldn't see, a battle she'd lost that night on her couch. I closed the notebook and shoved it back in the box, my hands shaking. I haven't told anyone about it, not Mom, not Jake, not even Clara. I don't know if I ever will. Part of me wants to confront her, to ask how long, to demand answers, but what would that solve? It wouldn't undo what she said, wouldn't erase the way it's changed me. I'm trying to move forward, to focus on Mom, on my job, on building a life that isn't defined by this. But every time I see Clara, at a family dinner, at the grocery store, anywhere, it's like a wound that won't heal. I don't think I'll ever trust her the way I used to, and that hurts more than I expected. Family's supposed to be the one thing you can count on, the one constant in a world that's always shifting. But what happens when it's not? What happens when the people you love most are the ones who break you? So, I'm left with this question, and I want you to think about it too: what would you do with a family secret that changes everything? Would you confront it, lay it all bare and deal with the fallout? Would you bury it, pretend it never happened, and hope it fades with time? Or would you walk away, cut ties, and try to start over? I don't know what the right answer is, and maybe there isn't one. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in this, that other people have wrestled with secrets that tear them apart. And if this story hit you, if it made you feel something, share it with someone who gets it. Maybe they've got their own secrets they're carrying, their own wounds that won't heal. Maybe we're all just trying to figure out how to keep going when the people we love let us down.